Hey y'all, welcome back to Culture Cult. My name's Marie. I am the host of the show. And if it's your first time here, this is a show where I tell y'all crazy history stories from every country in the world in hopes that we can become less ignorant of each other. But today we're not doing that. Today we are telling a travel story, and a really beautiful and inspiring one for that matter. So I am a sucker for adventurism and people who take really large risks in travel. And our guest today is known for just that. So today we are interviewing Kaylin Otto from the Unruly Travel Podcast. And they are a true travel inspiration. So this episode's for you. If you complain that you don't have money to travel or that you don't have time, dude, I get it. It seems like it is impossible, especially with how we see people travel on the internet with their asses out at a pool in Indonesia. But Kaylin is going to show that you can travel with any means. And with what any means, I mean that they set off on a bike to bike across the entire continent of America, which I don't know if you know how big America is, but it's freaking huge. And they did it with just a $200 gift card, not even cash, a gift card. So if you are a person who thinks that travel is too expensive or just out of your reach, listen to this episode and tell me that you're not at the very least inspired. Who was your travel inspiration? I know this is a cheesy question, but I am curious who you were really inspired by.
I guess myself after I started doing it, because I grew up in rural Ohio. I knew one girl who was older than me who was a family friend who had been an exchange student. But I was not exposed to a lot of culture. I was not exposed to different parts of the world. I was in a really small town and there was not a lot of diversity there. So I basically really had no one to look up to as travel inspiration besides this one girl who I knew had gone on exchange for a year. And so I guess I became my own travel inspiration because besides myself, I didn't know other people who were doing it. And it completely changed my life because I was an exchange student for a year because of her. And
Wow.
then I came back and then I did the bike trip. And I probably never would have done that trip had I not been exposed to travel in the first place. I would never even think about it, nor would I think that I could do it. I didn't feel ready to go to college. I didn't have money to go to college. And I didn't know what other options were, to be honest. So when my parents were like, we have this little bit of savings you can take and be an exchange student. After that, you're on your own. I was just like, let's do it. But had I not done that, I think I would have really soon started to feel like I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really have a huge attachment to home, but I didn't know what I was doing next.
Where did you study abroad to?
I was in Chile for a year. It was a huge shock because, if travelers are listening to this, they're like, oh, yeah, what's a big deal going to another country? But if you're me and you're 17 and you have never been outside of the country before, your vacation is to Virginia Beach. And then you land in a new country with a host family. I didn't speak any Spanish. And so it was huge. I was like learning a language from scratch, just jumped into having a new family with siblings all of a sudden. And I graduated high school already, but I had to go back to high school. So that was hard. And it was definitely a huge culture shock. And for not traveling, not knowing how to travel, that was my first international flight, the longest flight I'd ever been on.
That's actually a very long flight.
Yeah, it's a very long, it's a very long flight. And then, I told you about the one girl who was an exchange student, and I had heard from her what it was like. My experience was not like that at all. Like, first of all, I didn't even like to party. Second of all, my host parents were much, much stricter. I had to go to school, even though I had already graduated and my grades didn't matter. So it was not what I expected, but I guess it was perfect for building my story to where I'm at now.
Yeah. Yeah. So you go back from Chile and then you literally biked across the country on a couple $100. That's an extreme. Where did that idea come from? That's a very specific kind of travel and a very ballsy kind of travel for a 19-year-old,
Yeah. So I guess when I got back from Chile, I guess there was a lot that was going into it. So I was finding my own personality, my own opinions and views, and also becoming a little bit saddened because I came of this age where I'm aware of what's happening in the world. And I also came back home from being a year abroad, all these feelings, traveling for the first time, backpacking for the first time. And then I came back to suburbia. And while I love my parents, it was a huge change from traveling with friends all the time to just being at home again, sitting there. And so I actually was like, I'm really angsty. Like, I need to get out of here. I need to go do something. I'm craving another adventure. And I went to this yoga meetup, and I just said there was this intention circle, and they're like, what is everyone doing next with their life? And I was like, I don't know. I don't have any money. I don't have any plans, but I really want to travel. And someone just randomly mentioned, they're like, oh, I just heard of this woman who travels and she just makes it up as she goes. And people pay her to come do talks about her lifestyle. And that's what, gets her along her way. And I never looked this woman up. I don't know if she's real. I don't know who she is. She lived in my mind. And so when I went home, I was like, okay, I'm not going to work for 12 months or whatever so I can save up. Not going to do that. And I was like, how can I travel? Not a lot of money. This woman did it. And so this woman
I love this
that no one knows of, I don't know if she's real. And so I just did some research online, and I was like, okay, if I got a bike, I found this guy, Rob Greenfield, who would bike from place to place across the country. And I was like, I could do that. I'm not like a super athlete, but I'm young, I have some energy. And this plan came together in my head, a way to pursue an adventure with little money, challenge myself. I wanted to actually I told you I was feeling a little bit down when I became like politically aware of all these different things. And I was like, are there good people out there? Is the world as scary as they tell us it is? Could I do this and work for everything? Like, would people support that? Would people accept me and like help me along my journey? So I just somehow formulated this plan in my head, like, gonna set off on a bike, work for everything that I need. And then I ended up taking a $300 gift card with me because my mom forced me to take it, like at the last second when she was leaving me.
She's like, the bare minimum, please.
Yeah, the bare minimum is like 200 pounds of Cliff Bars and this $300 gift certificate. And so I took that, and I actually did end up using most of it when I crashed my bike and had to get it repaired.
Where did you crash it?
I crashed it like my second weekend, maybe, on the Blue Ridge Parkway.
That's what I was just about to ask. Like, how the fuck are you about to do the Blue Ridge? I was imagining me biking down the Blue Ridge Parkway, and I was like, I think I just walk it.
It's intense for someone who has no experience and also doesn't have a passion for biking. It's like, it's a lot to take on. So I used most of that money for that. So basically on that, like after that, I was on my own, literally work exchanging for everything, dumpster diving, sleeping in my tent. I brought like a 1-person tent with me.
Love it.
And so I was like sleeping in public parks. I was sleeping on church pews, just anything I could to get by. There was no like, I'm going to buy an Airbnb for the night or I'm going to get a hotel room. That was not.
It was not an option.
Yeah, that was not a thing. And I didn't bike the whole thing. I ended up like hitchhiking randomly sometimes and finding rides through Craigslist rideshare because after that bike accident, I was like, I have no business taking on big hills. Like, it's not for me. I don't want to die this way.
No.
So I would get like Craigslist rideshare or make enough money to take a really cheap Greyhound bus for some sections. So I ended up biking about 500 miles of it, but it was a lot of rides with random people and biking.
Wait, I love that. I also want to go back to the first when you're like setting off on your bike with your Cliff Bars and your mom's like, holy fucking shit. And like, you're like waving goodbye and you're so optimistic and you have no idea what you're about to go into. I want to like go back to that moment. And then when you were like, oh shit, I'm out here. Yeah. Like,
so I don't know how optimistic I was at the start. So my parents actually dropped me off at this farm in Virginia because I was wolfing, which if people don't know, network of organic farmers, you work for so many hours, they give you a place to stay, they give you food. And they were really close to the starting point of where I was going to start my biking journey. So I was like, I'll be here for a week or whatever, and then I'll start from there. So when my parents were dropping me off at that farm, like, here's the thing about me. I will do really brave things. I will do it, but I will cry and I will be scared and I will show that, but I will still do it anyway. And so I think that that moment, like when they left me, I was probably like, oh shit. And I was like, okay, I'll just take it day by day. I'm just riding a bike, stop when I'm hungry, ask for food, like simple things. We can do it if we string it all together. And when I had that bike accident, that was
Oh,
like a big oh shit moment because I definitely could have got seriously injured or died, and I just got lucky. And that was like, okay, I'm a lot more fragile and inexperienced than I think I am. And I could really hurt myself pursuing this adventure. So that was like, oh my God, I'm in trouble.
yeah. What was the route you thought you were going to go, and what did you actually end up doing?
So the route that I thought that I was going to take was I thought that I was going to
Yes.
bike the whole entire thing, not miss one foot of it, from Virginia to California, and it's called the Transamerica Trail. So people bike it. It's a thing that they do. But usually these people are really experienced and they've been training for a really long time, and a lot of times they do it with a support system. So they have like
Mm.
someone in a camper following them, and then they all camp together and they keep
Oh, I
going.
love that.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm gonna follow this, every inch of this. And I had never been past like probably Alabama. So I had
Oh
no
my God.
idea what was out west. And I ended up like my route did start in Virginia and I did go to California with some stuff like this along the way. I basically followed that route, but I
Yeah.
would get on and off of it when new adventures would arise. And then I ended up working for a catering company in California. That's a wild story, and saved up enough money to fly to Hawaii.
Ah,
And there I stayed with my ex-boyfriend's best friend for like a month so that I
ah,
could visit Hawaii for the first time. And we had a great time together. And then my trip ended there and I came back home.
I love that. As someone who's like also now I've driven it. I've never done what you did, but
Yeah.
I think the terrain and how it changes and seeing going from east to west is the coolest trip you could ever do. I think it is such a dramatic change, and you realize how much like bio gnomes or whatever the word is America
Mhm.
has. And what was like one of those moments where you were somewhere on your trip and you were like, wow, this is so special. Like I'm in a very special place.
That's a great question. That happened in a lot of places, but the first
Yeah.
one that came to mind was when I went to Crater Lake
Oh
in
my
Oregon.
God.
Um,
Oregon.
for the first time, and I actually met this guy through Craigslist, or not through Craigslist. I met a lot of guys through Craigslist. I met a guy through couch surfing, and he was from Switzerland, and he had rented a car, and we met up for like coffee once while I was staying in Portland. And then he was like, "Do you want to go on an adventure with me?" So we threw
Yeah.
my bike in the back of the car, and we ended up sleeping in the car. Like it was freezing. It was freezing cold. I remember this very clearly because I was so cold and kind of miserable. But we drove through the national park there. We jumped into the lake. We went swimming. Then I remember he lost the keys, so we were looking for the keys. We found them at night, and then there was no place to stay. He was going to get us like a hotel room or something because he was not as frugal as me. Everything was already booked. So we found this lake and there was a campground there and that was full. And so we like snuck back off into this like random construction parking lot and parked the car and slept there. But I just remember like after that day of being in the lake, and then we went and just like got drinks and watched people dance under the twinkle lights. It was super magical. And then we woke up at the butt crack of dawn and went back and watched the sunrise come up over the lake. And I was like, I am living now. Like,
Oh,
this is, I didn't even know that places like this existed, especially in the US. So that was pretty
yeah.
magical.
And that's why I love road trips because, like, you're
Yeah.
going to just run into so many more magical moments. You entered this trip with so much of like, let shit happen that
Yeah.
so much beauty came to you.
That's so true because I know some travelers like plan, plan, plan. This is what's going to happen. And that's what I thought I was doing on that trip. I'm like, I need to prove to myself and someone, I don't know who, that I can bike all of this. And then I realized along the way, like, who? Who am I saying that for? I would rather go off on adventures and have fun and live life and
Yes.
experience things than hold myself to a strict schedule for no reason.
For no, it's just you.
So, yeah, I love that you said that. I think that's like a key to traveling.
You left with only so much money. You blew it on a bike. What were some ways you were making money? And were there days where you're like, holy fuck, I'm fucked? And then something
Yeah.
happened.
Yes. Yeah. There was a lot of times where I'm like, oh God, what am I doing? So first to make money. So I really didn't have to have a lot of money. I'm on a bike. I have my tent. And so when you are on the Transamerica Trail, it lists police stations, churches, and public parks. I never slept in a police station because I'm like, no.
Mm.
But I was sleeping on church pews or in churches because you would just like call them when you got there and they would come
Oh,
let you in.
wait, I
And then
love that.
let yourself out the next morning. It was really creepy, actually, like
Oh,
being the only one in there. But so lodging was free. Really, food was the only thing that I
okay.
had to worry about. And I did a lot of direct work exchanges in exchange for food. Like I would go to a restaurant and ask to work for the day.
I love that.
And then, like at the churches, other bikers would leave food behind. So they'd leave like pasta you could cook at night or energy bars or whatever. So, like, I was also picking up things for free. I was also dumpster diving, picking up things for free. So, I really didn't need a lot. But when I did do work exchanges for money, like, for example, I walked into this like Amish furniture store and asked to work for money, and I had to like dust everything and clean the carpets. And they gave me cash on the spot.
Yes.
Another time that I earned some money was when I walked into this restaurant and I was asking to work for food, and they're like, no, we don't do that. But then the woman who owned it was like, actually, my brother's maid is out of town. Would you be open to like babysitting his kid and cleaning his house and for a week? And if so, you can stay there and we'll feed you. And I was
What?
like, yeah, it was so random and so weird, but I was like, sure. So I
Yeah.
like slept on this guy's couch, took care of his kid, cleaned his house.
Wait, I'm sorry. You're like permanently in this random like family memory. Like this
I know.
child is going to
I
remember you.
know. I'm hopefully they'll be inspired. You know,
No,
they'll
I
be like
think they
one
will.
person randomly biked into our life and was on an epic adventure. So it was just like a lot of random things like that. I worked for a catering company. I worked in Hawaii with this girl who sold her own jewelry. So it was just a lot of whatever I could find.
In America, like money is so important. Like it's like literally what we all live for. And I think it's really not as important. You just need to like be more creative. You can make money in so many ways. Like we have the vulnerability to ask, you
Right?
know,
Because it's
that
embarrassing to ask. It's
yeah, but why is
uncomfortable.
it embarrassing? That's like
That's
a
the
whole other
thing.
level.
It shouldn't be.
It
Yeah.
shouldn't be. Like work should just be work. Like, hey, offer a service. I offer my body, my mind. Like, but in America, we're so like, we're just so backwards in a lot of, not everywhere, but a lot of ways of just like, you need to have this like corporate job and then you get your 2 weeks of vacation and then that's the only time you'll feel alive. Or you could just be more creative and just make money however you can
Or
and go live.
or outside of the monetary system, because what I
Mm,
was doing, I was not making money most of the time. Most of the time it
mm,
was like, yes, I'll give you my body to work for an hour in exchange for this meal. And that means that I didn't have to save up for my bike trip in the way that people go in corporate
yes.
America and they work 70 hours a week so they can have a 2-week vacation every year. They exchange all that time for 2 weeks. And so this was a way to be outside of that and
Oh,
just do it while I was on the road. And obviously, that type of travel is not sustainable unless you're just living that lifestyle. And there is a lot of privilege of being able to walk in somewhere and be
true.
like, can I just work? And them saying yes, because I'm sure that unhoused people try that sometimes. And it
Mm,
depends on how you look and,
how
do
you
you look well
present
groomed?
yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So, but it's like, it really got me thinking outside of the traditional monetary system.
Did you notice some pretty big changes throughout your mindset as you were traveling? Like, were you becoming stronger? Were you becoming lonely? Like, what were some mindset changes you were seeing?
That's also a great question. So before I set off on the trip, I was like tangling with what was the start of a long period of anxiety and depression.
Okay.
But for me, changing up my scenario usually helps even just for a little bit. It doesn't heal or cure anything, but a new place can definitely give you a fresh set of eyes. So on that trip, I really did go in and out of like battling with a lot of anxiety because I am an anxious person and also dealing with depression and then feeling so lonely at times. Like,
Mm,
imagine I'm like 19 years old and I'm sleeping in this random park in a tent by myself and I'm scared that someone's going to come get me, but also I'm so tired I want to fall asleep and like It was the age before social media was a thing where we like
Okay.
got on it as an activity. That wasn't a thing. So I wasn't like texting my friends and posting on Instagram. And I was just in this tent by myself, sad and anxious and tired and hungry. So like I wouldn't say that there was this magical thing where I realized how strong
Mm.
I was and I could do it. I really it was really hard actually. And I think now of where I'm at now or even a few years after that, I could look back and be like that made me realize how strong I am and how I can keep pushing through things that are uncomfortable. But at the time it was hard. I kept going in and out of extremes of being like so excited that I was on this journey and so
Mm-hmm.
thankful to like I hate this so much and I'm so lonely and I'm so sad and why did I ever do this?
Yeah, but I'm wondering like why you didn't quit though. Like why didn't you quit?
Um one it would have been like physically really hard to quit because my parents did have the resources where they could put me on a plane and bring me back if they wanted to, but my mom asked me before I left. She was like, "If you ask me to do that, what do you want me to say?" And I was like, "Tell me no." And so when I did, like after that bike
Oh, you did
accident,
ask at some
yeah, I
point.
was like, "I need to come home. I almost killed myself." She was like, "You told me to tell you no."
I
And
love your mom.
so I it sounds like you're okay. I'm not paying for you to come back. So either find your way back or keep on going. So it would have been physically a lot. And I had already felt like I had shared what I was doing with people through Facebook and whatever. Like when I told people I was going to do this before I left town, they were like, "You're gonna die,
Oh,
you're gonna get assaulted, and
oh.
this is really scary." And I was like, "No, no, I can do it." So I did feel like this need to go on just to show myself that I can see it through. I was just like, I'm already so far into it. I
Oh,
also thought that maybe, like, I had heard all these different things of California. Like I said, I've never been over there before this. And I was like, maybe I will find happiness and my depression will be cured by the end of this bike trip, and I will just live in California. Like I land there on my bike, something magically happens and I live there. So I also had this goal in mind that like this will all be over once I reach California, which obviously was
mm.
not true and it didn't happen. But I did have this thing like this will be over when I get there.
I totally understand that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but weirdly though, when I did go to California, it solved a lot of my problems. Like I actually
Yeah.
was so happy there. Did you feel like there was somewhere on that trip where your soul felt very connected to the land?
I think that I started to exhale once I got into Oregon and California,
Mm.
especially into the redwoods. Like
Oh,
I I guess that was the beginning of me realizing that I am not an ocean person. I am a mountain person,
oh.
a forest dweller. And I didn't realize that before that trip. So I think while it wasn't like this is the place, it was like this is the setting and this is a big exhale to be surrounded by greenery. And, you know, like I said, I went from mindset in Ohio to redwoods of California. Like
Oh,
these people are more aligned. There's more adventure here and people who want to be outdoors. So I definitely did feel like for a little bit in California, like this is my place for sure. I guess I just realized that it wasn't, but that I would be back. That like I
yeah.
can still enjoy it, you know, because I've gone back so many times after that. Being on that bike trip in California made it even more magical than when I just go back now. But it just I guess
Yeah.
it just wasn't the place for me.
Before we get into your travel story, I did want to ask, like, why do you think so many people, especially like Americans, use money as an excuse not to travel and not to experience
Mm.
things? That's usually the thing that comes up. Why do you think people use that as such a crutch when, like, you can clearly create adventure?
Yeah, you can create adventure. Well, I'd say it's just that it's a crutch because I think the real thing is that people are afraid or they are afraid of losing out on money if they take time off work or they don't have someone to go with and they're afraid to go alone.
Mm.
So money is the easy solution to be like, I don't have money for this. And in some cases, it is true. People don't have the resources to be able to go off and do things like if they have kids, like what I did would be really hard to do with kids. But I also think that like people truly believe that. Like we are so money centered in the US. And I think that most people think that you have to do things like I work, I get paid, I spend the money. I don't think that they realize there are other ways to do things and that there's whole communities of people who are doing things outside of that system. Like, I think honestly, it's just a lack of creativity and education when it comes to that area.
Yeah. So like, let's say this one's listening and they're like, damn, I have the money, so I can't use that as an excuse. And maybe it's like, maybe it's like they don't trust themselves to do a solo
Yeah.
trip. They don't trust themselves to even maybe they never even left their state or their country. Like, what advice do you have to someone who just doesn't know how to trust themselves? Like, you clearly had to learn a lot of self-trust.
Yeah, I did. I had to learn it because I definitely didn't have it before that. I didn't know how to follow my intuition. I didn't know how to do any of these things. I would say, I don't know if this is the most graceful thing, but when you are having that moment of like, I really want to do this, force yourself to get that ticket or tell someone you're doing it in those high moments because you're not going to live in that high moment where you do feel confident or really inspired. And then when you're back in that low moment, it's like you already did it. Like, you already bought the ticket. You don't want to waste that money. Like, you better get on that damn plane, you know? So I think when you're in those high moments, be really aware, take advantage of it, plan it, get it started, and force yourself to do the first step. You don't have to, like, if you're going on a 2-week adventure out of the country for the first time, do not sit there and try to imagine everything that could happen in those 2 weeks. You're not trying to plan those 2 weeks. Just plan getting on the plane. Plan getting to the airport and doing the first thing. Because if you try to imagine all of that, you're going to be so overwhelmed. But if you can force yourself to do the first part, you will learn the rest along the way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I also think like doing even smaller things before your trip. So like it doesn't have to be trip related, but like do things that involve self-trust, like where you have to
Yeah.
learn a new skill or you have to go on a date with someone, or you have to like whatever these things are, like do like little challenges before. Also, my suggestion is to look back on like what you've already done that's scary in life.
Yeah. It could
Yeah.
be hard relationships or a hard upbringing. And it's like, if you survive that, you can definitely survive travel.
Yeah, you can get on the plane. You're good.
Yeah, for sure. I think
Yeah.
that's such a great piece of advice.
Yeah, I totally agree. And like you're here for a travel story.
Yes.
So I want to know your travel story you want to share with everyone.
Yeah. So basically, when I got to California and I got to like the coastline, I was then going to bike down the coastline.
Beautiful.
And then I had like $6. I remember very specifically. And I could not, it wasn't on the Transamerica Trail anymore. So I could not find a free place to stay. And on the apps that I was using, like I was using Tinder, I was using Couch Surfing, Warm Shower, all of these places to find a place to stay. It just wasn't happening. I could not find a place for whatever reason. Like, it was not happening. So I remember, oh, and I'd gotten my tire popped that day. And I really wanted to take the bus, but I did not have enough money to get on the bus. So I was like, in a terrible mood. And I had extra tires. I fixed it, but I was in this terrible mood. And I get into town. I was like, whatever, I'll just buy a camp spot. Didn't have enough money for that. So I was like on the side of the road, hysterically crying. I called my mom on the phone because it was like a big letdown. Like, I finally made it to California. It's supposed to be magical and everything's fine. And here I am feeling terrible. And so I'm crying, talking to my mom on the phone. And like this car pulls up and they're like looking at me like, you're in our way. And I realized I was in someone's driveway. So I backed up and I'm just like ugly cry snot. And the woman rolls down the window and she's like, "Are you okay, honey?" And I was just like, no, like it just came out. I couldn't stop it. It was like months and months worth of turmoil just coming up. And she was so sweet. She's like, "Well, I'm not a killer. You can go ask anyone and you can put your tent in our yard." And I was like, oh my, like, I don't even care if you're a killer at this point. Like, I just, you know what I mean? Like, I've done so many sketchy things on this trip. Like, you look so sweet. I'm not afraid, you know? And so I ended up actually staying with her. They like fed me. I took a shower and I stayed in their extra bedroom. And it was the sweetest couple that
Oh,
I'm still friends with. And they ran this catering business where they catered a bike ride for climate change. They catered the food there. And they're like, "We could use you on our catering crew if you want to make some money." And so I stayed with them at least for a couple of weeks, like working on the catering crew. They kind of like adopted me as their
oh my
feral child.
God.
And they took me to like, I really wanted to pet a cow. So we we're like chasing different herds of, not like chasing, but like
Yeah.
trying to find all these different herds of cows. And they took me down to the coastline of California, which
Oh,
was very romantic to me. And I saw starfish, and we went through the forest together. And so it turned into this like really lovely situation out of a really terrible situation. And then after that, I actually went back and worked with them the next summer, I think, on their catering crew
wow.
just to do that. And I still keep up with them. So it was a bad time that turned into a really amazing moment. And that's how I had enough money to fly to Hawaii.
Lord, that woman.
She is an angel.
What's her name?
Yvette.
Yvette. Oh my God. Shout out. Oh my God. You're an actual saving grace. This woman turned to be like such a beautiful piece of your life. Like,
Yeah.
and saved you in that moment.
And had my tire not popped, I wouldn't have been there at that time when they were pulling in.
Oh,
I wouldn't have been standing there. I probably would have never met them. I don't know what I would have done. I mean, I would have never gone to Hawaii. It would have changed
oh
so
my
many
God.
things. Like, it freaks me out.
No, it freaks me out too. Cause there's just certain moments in your life where you're like, just one thing,
Yeah.
and everything would have been different.
Even if I was standing maybe like 10 feet down the street, it's so
And if you had looked normal, if you weren't crying, and if you were like smiling, she would have literally driven right past you. That makes me so, so happy. And like, I guess you're from Ohio, I'm from Alabama, and I'm sure you get all the time. Anytime you travel, people are just like, oh, be careful out there. It's a crazy world. And can you say with the bottom of your heart that you don't believe in that like kind of negativity when people say like that stuff? Because I mean, I feel like you met so many good people on your trip.
First, I'll have to say, like, obviously, I do have privilege being a white person who looks like cis and straight and all of these things. Like, it does. I know that my experience would be profoundly altered, possibly, if I was someone else in a different body. But for what I experienced, I will say, yes, the world is wild. Okay. There's so many people out there, and there's been people who have hitchhiked and it's gone wrong and they've ended up in a morgue. But in general, people were not as scary as I thought. They were so much more loving and helping and compassionate than I ever imagined them to be. And I don't feel that way sometimes now because, I'm not depending on other people who have different ideas than I do. And I am like online seeing this stuff. And so it's like, in person, yes, I would get that all the time from like older generations. Like, it's so scary. It's a terrible world out there. You're going to get this and that. And then even online now from younger people, it's like, if this person doesn't agree with you, they're your enemy. But if you're out on this bike trip, like, I have super radical, like, to the left belief systems. I still needed to depend on people and interact with people who had different beliefs than me and different styles of living. And it did take away a lot of that fear, like a lot of that barrier that
oh my God, yeah,
the world puts up between us, and sometimes for very valid reasons, but it did dispel a lot of that. So when I am in a funk, sometimes I'm just like, wow, people are usually pretty good when you get down to the core of it. They might be uneducated or miseducated, but yeah, I think that a lot of humans do have that desire to help each other and be helped. And yeah, when you're traveling like that, you definitely learn that.
Yeah, I love how you said like depend on each other, because like when you're in a community, when you need someone, they usually are just you're gonna be vulnerable, and people can sense that and they respect that, and then they themselves become vulnerable. But I think like especially when I think the older generation, they're usually just stuck in their house, they're just watching TV, or like if someone's on their phone all the time, they're not actually making real connections. And I actually interviewed someone from Alaska, and it's one of my favorite interviews I did. She was awesome, and she was saying the exact thing. Like in Alaska, you need each other. Like it is such an extreme environment. And she was like, I believe in this political system and my neighbor believes in that political system. But if I'm in a shitty situation, he is going to help me. And I think a lot of places in America, it's like, I got my AC, I got my house, I got my 4 trucks. I don't need anyone. You're scary. Like I have a gun. And it's like you boxed yourself into where you can't even see the niceness of others.
And everyone's in their little box.
And
so we don't even know. Sometimes there's one of your neighbors you would actually be best friends with.
Right.
But like until your car gets stuck in the mud or your tire pops and you're on the side of the road, you don't really know that because you're not forced to interact.
God, that is so true. You don't have to bike across the whole damn US, but like put yourself in like vulnerable situations and like be vulnerable, and you'll just see how much more kindness there is out there. And but yeah, like to end now? Like, who are you outside of the bike trip and who are you outside of just being travel? I know you're a pretty big activist and
Yeah. I do a lot of like animal rights, anti-speciesist activism. I rescue farmed animals like illegally. I'm also just like really into being in nature. I mean, we are nature. Like we are
Yes.
animals. People think there's this separation between us and nature and us and other animals, but it's like we are nature. We are animals. So I guess lately I've just been getting back into that a lot and then connecting my passions to that, like activism, queerness. Even I'm queer and I noticed that in nature and I noticed that in myself. And so yeah, lately I've really like exploring those different connections through writing or my own podcast or blog.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fun. Thank you for noticing the different sides of myself, because they
Yeah.
all definitely do connect back, but yeah, it's interesting when they all mix together.
Yeah. And this is actually a question like I want to ask, because so my podcast is all about like admitting it's okay if you're ignorant about something, just
Yeah.
ask. So
Yeah.
I don't really understand what the they that you're a they. Like I don't know how to use it in a sentence.
Yeah,
So, like,
yeah.
what is that all about? Like, what does that mean? Like, does it have to do with your sexuality? Does it have to do with like how you dress? Like, I'm a little bit confused. And I feel like there's a lot of
Yeah.
countries on here. So I'm sure they would want to know too.
For sure. So, but more has to do with gender. So, if you say
Okay.
queerness, it could relate to gender or sexuality. I think most people relate it automatically to sexuality.
Okay.
And that's not the case. Gender also goes under this. So, if you have this understanding of gender as a social concept that was created by humans, right? We have physicality, we have um like the genitals that you have or the body that you have, which is like scientific. But then gender is something different. It is a social construct created by humans. Non-human animals do not have it, right? They don't have gender. We made it up. And we all collectively agree that like this is what it means to be a man. This is what it means to be a woman. And so the fact that it is completely made up, but then there are serious repercussions in life if you don't conform to those gender roles. So sometimes you are like, yes, I am a woman, but whatever it means to be a woman, if you break those norms, you will be punished for that, whether it's socially or physically, like trans people dying, or when you were a kid, your mom said, oh, you have to wear a dress to this function. Or if you're
Okay.
a little kid and everyone sees you as a boy and you're not allowed to wear a dress and you want to. So that's gender. Gender is this collective idea we all bought into, and you get punished if you don't follow gender norms, even though they don't really make sense. Because a dress is a dress. It doesn't have a gender. It's like literally a piece of clothing, and we just manipulated it in a certain way. So I am non-binary, which means it just means that like I don't feel like I fit into whatever it means to be a man or a woman. It just means that like my gender is more fluid. So yeah, I just don't fit into one exact group. Some days, if you looked at me, I'd be wearing boy clothes. And some days I feel girly, and some days I don't feel either. It's just like whatever I want. And so using they, them pronouns is a way to, I guess, feel more comfortable with saying like, I'm not a woman. I am not in this box because I don't conform to these social things. And for me, I wish that like gender was just not a thing. Like we could just wear what we wanted and date who we wanted and like the colors or the sports that we wanted. And it wasn't a big deal, because it does create a lot of violence in the world. So yeah, being non-binary for me is just like opting out of that and giving myself permission to express who I am through all of these things, like as it comes through, whatever I'm feeling it. So if someone says that they use they, them pronouns, it just means instead of saying he or his, for them to say they or theirs. It is a hard change sometimes to make in your head at first, but it does become normalized, and then it's not a big deal. You know, a lot of my friends go by they, them pronouns. So I'll just be like, they did this and they did that, they did this. And it just, it starts to come naturally. So yeah, I'm really glad that you asked that question. I hope that I answered that well enough.
You explained it so well, because I have been asking this so many times, and people would come off condescending, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're such a millennial." And I'm like, "Stop, just answer the question." And I've never understood it, and I did not want to come off ignorant, but I just did not understand it. And I feel like you explained it super well. And again, this is an international audience listening, so I want to make sure they understand when I use the
Yeah.
word they, and like they understand. Cause I feel like, what we are in like a first world America, and like there's just certain different things happening over here than other places. So
Yeah, thank you. And I'll add two more things onto that
yeah.
might help listeners understand. Like, one, in English, for like hundreds of years, we have used the word they to refer to one thing. Like, if you found someone's keys on the beach, you don't know who they are. You'd be like, oh, I found someone's keys. I wonder where they are, if they're still here. You're referring to one person, but you're not indicating what gender or physical
Mm,
sex they are. So it has been used because people love to use that argument, but it's incorrect to say that they is only for multiple people. And that's like a historic scholarly thing that you could fact check. And another thing I would say is that, like, a lot of people imagine gender as a spectrum. You're a man or you're a woman or you're a tomboy, you're somewhere in between. It's like a sliding scale. But I had a non-binary person on my podcast named Robbie, and they explained it so well, is that, like, gender is kind of like the night sky, and then there's all these different stars. So you have man, you have woman, you have non-binary, you have trans, you have all these different things, and it's not a scale. You don't have to go back and forth. They're just different ones that are like existing on their own. So maybe that will help
yeah,
people.
no, that's super
And
helpful.
people in other languages have had words for, like, basically non-binary people, people who didn't conform to just two genders. Native people have had that language, and in Spanish, you would say like ella instead of ella. It's all over the world now, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that grows and how the traveler community embraces it.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And like, yeah, thank you for answering that. Cause I feel like I wanted to make sure I understood before I start using they in a sentence and
Yeah,
everything,
yeah,
you know? Yeah,
yeah.
that was super, super helpful.
So glad you asked. I'm so glad you asked. For
Yeah.
real.
But just to wrap up, you have a lot of stuff going on. Like you can promote everything, but like who is your podcast for? Who would be a great listener for y'all?
Because I talk on about so many subjects,
Yeah.
there's really not like one specific listener, but I do talk about travel, my story, and other stories. Like, I've interviewed people who have walked across the US, so like
So
that would
cool.
be great for you. I talk about alternative living. Like, I had a natural builder on who talked about building her own house at age 45 out of mud. I talk about activism that I do and gender as well. There's a whole podcast on being non-binary. So if you're interested in any of these like alternative things, you can find an episode for you, and they all these topics like interlace through all of them, especially travel. So if you enjoy travel and you're interested in these other things or you want to learn more, like, it's for you.
Yes. And it's called Unruly Travel Podcast, right? That's what it's called.
Yeah, if you look
Traveler.
up Unruly Travel and then
Okay.
by Kaylin Otto, CALENOTTO, it should pop up, and I would love to have you listen and join in on these conversations.
Yes. And then like your book, you also have a book.
It's The Art of Unruly Travel on a Budget, and it's actually a guidebook to traveling the US and other countries if you don't have a lot of money. And it like tells you all of the things that I did on my bike trip, what you need to know about them, how to stay safe. And it also has a lot more stories than I've told here today, interlaced with the different sections. So, like, if you read the section on transportation, you'll also read stories of me hitchhiking and using Craigslist rideshare. So it's a guidebook in that way, but also has a lot of cool stories and pictures. So if people want to check that out, you can go to the link in my bio on my Instagram, or you can go to unrulytravel.com, and I have a store tab where you can buy it ebook or printed.
Yeah. And I actually saw it's at Barnes and Nobles too. I saw it.
Yes, it is. It is.
So
I don't know
cool.
how it got there, but it's there.
Dude, honestly, writing a book is one of my goals. I don't know what I'd write about, but I'm really impressed by people who write books.
Yeah, it's hard, but it's doable. It's kind of
Yeah.
like the travel thing. You just got to force yourself to get into it.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part.
Yeah. And then anything else in your horizon that you're looking forward to or you want to promote?
So I also did just start a Patreon not that long ago. And if you get on there, you can look at things that I'm putting out into the world before they come out. You can help shape my future work. And there's like monthly Q&A sessions. So
Oh,
say
that's
you have
cool.
these questions about gender, no one was answering them, you didn't know where to go, you didn't understand online, or you have a question about your first trip that you're ever taking. That's a great time where we can just like talk one-on-one, and you could ask any questions that you have. So I really want people to join me there because that's fun. And yeah, stay tuned if you follow me on Instagram at unruly_traveler with 2 L's. Hopefully you see me heading off for Survivor someday.
Okay, I loved this episode because Kaylin is the perfect example of what the purpose of this podcast is. I truly didn't and haven't ever really understood what being non-binary was about. And you know what? I took the risk and I asked, and guess what? She didn't meet me with insecurity or with hate or with judgment. She came back to me with kindness and just explained. That's all we can really ask for. And now imagine if we can take that small little moment that just happened between me and Kaylin and we all apply that to each other. And what if we just admitted to each other we were ignorant about something when we don't know something, and we met it with curiosity, and then we were met back with kindness? I truly think if we are able to do that, that would solve like 90% of your personal problems, but also the world's problems. So thank you, Kaylin. I have mad respect for you because I was a little bit scared to ask, but you know what? You came back with kindness, and I really respect that. But back to their story. So, I mean, I hope y'all were inspired because I was very inspired by their story. I mean, Kaylin is just proof that you can travel. And she did it with barely any money, like a gift card. They had accidents on the way. They definitely cried. They failed. They fell down a mountain on their bike, and they did it scared. But I bet you that was the most incredible experience of their life because they took a risk and it paid off. I also just hope that we take away from their story the simple acts of kindness that they experienced throughout their entire trip, and that it took risks to be that vulnerable. To even hitchhike in general as a woman is very vulnerable, but yet each time she was met with kindness. So next time you feel that the world's very heavy, or you think the world is shit because you're watching too much news, or you've been on Instagram too long and you're in the comment section too long of any platform, just remember this and just try this. Try what Kaylin does. Just go out there in the world and just do something vulnerable. And I bet you 9 out of 10 times you'll be met with love. And because I truly believe that humans are kind. And if you don't believe me, I think that's because you haven't experienced the world enough, and that maybe you should go out there and experience it. Because whenever I have been out there in the world, people have been so, so kind. And there'll always be that one random asshole. But I hope that Kaylin's story just is a good reminder that you should go out there and live a little bit. So thank you, Kaylin, for coming on. My podcast can be really fun and ridiculous and very silly. I feel like we needed some good, wholesome content, especially nowadays. And just remember to be kind to each other. You will most likely receive kindness back. So to end this episode, I would love to give a little shout out to my home, California. That was a destination that Kaylin was aiming for when she set out on her bike. And it's also where years ago I left my hometown in Alabama and just drove straight to California, because that's just the place that everyone goes when they want a better life. And it is a place for a better life. And I had the best time out there. I had a very life-changing, most beautiful 6 years, and I'm going to get emotional if I think about it. So I love California. I hope to be back soon. I hope that I'm just taking a little break, and I see y'all listening from all over the state, and that really makes me so happy. So thank you guys. Okay, well, I hope this episode inspired y'all to do something ballsy today, or maybe think of an adventure that you want to take that's a bit risque, or at least at the minimum, do an act of kindness to a stranger, whether that just be opening the door, saying hello when people walk by, or just simply smiling back at someone. I think that really warms people's heart, because the people will be in their heads. And if you walk by and just smile at someone, it could really change their day. So try an act of kindness, y'all. And yeah. All right. I'll see y'all next time, y'all. Cheers.